the title. Homeless black girl shouts, "Don't dive! You are!" Millionaire is paralyzed when he finds out why, speaks to a deeply emotional and dramatic moment that carries both suspense and moral weight. At the heart of this story lies the intersection of poverty, innocence, intuition, and the stark realities that can change a person's life in a split second. The image of a homeless little girl warning a powerful, wealthy man not to drive carries an immediate sense of tension, because it suggests that she knows something he does not. It also reflects the idea that wisdom, truth, and even salvation can come from the most unexpected places. Imagine a millionaire preparing to leave in his car, confident and consumed with his own world, unaware that danger lies ahead. Out of nowhere, a homeless child, someone society might easily ignore, raises her voice desperately. Her warning is not random or born from fear, but from knowledge of a hidden truth. The phrase, "woer, wife," adds an even more shocking twist. It suggests that the girl knows a personal and intimate detail about his life, something she should have no way of knowing, and that what she is about to reveal directly concerns the person he loves most. That moment of shock freezes the millionaire, forcing him to question not only his immediate safety, but also his assumptions about people, class, and who holds knowledge in this world. This kind of story forces us to look beyond appearances. A homeless girl is often dismissed as powerless, invisible, or irrelevant, yet in this case, she becomes the voice of truth, the guardian of a life-changing message. Her warning challenges the millionaire to stop and listen, to humble himself before someone he might otherwise overlook. It highlights the theme that value and significance are not measured by money or social standing, but by the courage to speak up when it matters most. The millionaire's paralysis in the face of the revelation underscores how unprepared he was for such a confrontation. To hear a stranger, especially a child in desperate circumstances, speak directly about his wife would leave him shaken to his core. It disrupts his sense of control, security, and superiority. In that moment, all his wealth cannot shield him from the truth. What matters most is not the money he owns or the status he carries, but his willingness to face what is being revealed and to act upon it. This scenario also teaches a broader life lesson about awareness and humility. Sometimes warnings come from voices we least expect, and sometimes those voices save lives. The girl's courage to shout, even at the risk of being ignored or dismissed, represents resilience and the refusal to be silent when silence could mean disaster. Her act symbolizes bravery that goes beyond her own struggles and turns into an act of compassion and responsibility for others. For the audience, this title holds motivational power because it reminds us that no matter how small, powerless, or ignored we may feel, our voice can carry weight. It challenges us to value people not by their wealth or appearance, but by their humanity and what they can contribute. It also encourages those in privileged positions to listen more carefully, to not dismiss others because of their circumstances, and to realize that truth and wisdom are not bound by social status. Ultimately, the story embedded in this title is about transformation. The homeless girl is not just shouting a warning. She is acting as a catalyst for change in the millionaire's life. Her words bring him face to face with vulnerability, force him to reconsider his values, and perhaps inspire him to see her not as a homeless stranger, but as a brave soul who gave him a chance to avoid tragedy. It is a reminder that life's most powerful lessons often come from the most unexpected messengers. In life, people often make the mistake of judging others based on appearances, social status, or wealth. When someone is seen as poor, homeless, or struggling, society tends to overlook their voice and dismiss their knowledge as unimportant. Yet, History and countless personal stories remind us that wisdom and truth can come from the most unexpected places. The homeless girl shouting to the millionaire not to drive embodies this truth. She stands as a symbol of how someone seemingly invisible to the world can suddenly carry the most vital message, a message that could alter the course of another person's life. In this moment, her voice, though disregarded by many, becomes the one that must be heard. The girl's words represent more than just a warning. They reveal the power of intuition, experience, and awareness. A homeless person often lives on the edge of society, watching life unfold from the outside, unseen and unheard. Yet, this position gives them a perspective that others, blinded by luxury or comfort, may lack. The millionaire, secure in his wealth and power, may not have seen the danger ahead or sensed the truth, but the girl did. She saw beyond the surface and knew what was coming, and it was her courage that brought it to light. In that moment, she was not defined by her lack of a home, but by the strength of her insight. The shocking part of her role is that it challenges the natural order of expectations. The wealthy are often seen as the ones with influence, control, and decision-making power, while the poor are expected to remain silent. Yet here, the roles are reversed. It is the homeless girl who takes control, who speaks truth into a situation where silence could have meant disaster. The millionaire, with all his status and possessions, becomes the one frozen, paralyzed by her words. He, who is used to leading, becomes the listener. She, who is used to being ignored, becomes the leader in that critical moment. This reversal of roles teaches us that wisdom is not bound by wealth, education, or social class. Her voice cuts through the noise of assumptions, showing that human value is not measured by possessions, but by courage and clarity. The warning she gave was not only powerful, but deeply personal. She knew something about his wife, something he had not expected her to know. That insight, coming from a girl who lived on the margins of society, struck him harder than any blow. It forced him to confront a truth he could not ignore. The very person he might have passed by without a glance turned out to hold the key to protecting him and his family. The lesson here is universal. It is about listening, even when the voice seems small, insignificant, or unworthy in the eyes of society. How many times do we silence others simply because we think they have nothing to offer? How often do we ignore people who do not fit into the box of respectability or success? Yet in this story, the girl shows us that wisdom and strength often hide in the most unexpected places. Her courage to shout out, her refusal to stay silent, and her ability to see what others could not change the millionaire's life. At its heart, this moment tells us that every human being has value, and sometimes the most overlooked people carry the greatest truths. The homeless girl, with nothing to her name, reminded the world that true power lies not in wealth, but in the ability to speak up when it matters most. She is the proof that wisdom can shine through the darkest circumstances, and when it does, it can save lives. Fear is a powerful force, and in this story, the moment the homeless girl shouted, "Done for!" or I fmong, was filled with a fear that carried both urgency and love. Fear is often viewed as weakness, but in reality, fear can serve as one of life's greatest protectors. It warns us when danger is near. It forces us to pause when rushing forward could bring harm, and it makes us pay attention when the stakes are higher than we realize. The girl's voice, trembling with fear yet rising with courage, became the signal that forced the millionaire to stop in his tracks. It was not just about the words, she said, but the raw emotion in them that shook him deeply. When someone speaks with fear that is genuine, it reaches beyond the surface and touches the heart in a way that logic alone cannot. Fear in this context was not paralyzing, but motivating. The girl herself was homeless, already living in conditions where fear might have been a daily companion. Fear of hunger, fear of being forgotten, fear of surviving one more night without safety. Yet in this moment, she transformed her fear into a weapon of protection. Her cry was not about herself, but about saving someone else. That kind of fear, born from empathy, carries a weight that no amount of wealth or power can dismiss. When the millionaire froze at her words, it was because he could sense the sincerity and urgency. She had nothing to gain by warning him, which made her message even more powerful. Fear is also a connector between people of different worlds. The millionaire and the homeless girl could not have lived more different lives. He represented wealth, power, and social status, while she represented struggle, invisibility, and poverty. Yet in that instant, they were connected through fear. His fear rose because of hers, and that bridge allowed him to see her not as a stranger, not as a beggar, but as a human being with insight and truth. Her voice broke down the walls of social divide, reminding him that at the core, fear is universal. Everyone, no matter their background, can understand the weight of danger and the instinct to protect. It is important to see that fear here was also a turning point. Without it, he might have continued driving, unaware of the consequences waiting ahead. Fear disrupted his routine, stopped his confidence, and forced him into humility. Sometimes in life, we need fear to interrupt us. Confidence without caution can lead to downfall, but fear reminds us to slow down, to reflect, and to reconsider. The millionaire's shock was not only at her words, but at the realization that his life, which seemed so controlled and secure, could change in an instant. Fear humbled him, showing that even with all his wealth, he was not untouchable. Moreover, fear teaches us to value voices we might normally ignore. The homeless girl's warning could have easily been dismissed if he saw her as just another person begging on the street. But fear amplifies truth, and in that moment, her words had the power to cut through his skepticism. This shows that sometimes the most ignored people in society can be the ones to save us, not because they are stronger or richer, but because they are willing to let their fear speak where others would stay silent. The beauty of this story lies in how fear became both the messenger and the savior. Instead of being a sign of weakness, it became the force that stopped tragedy. The millionaire, paralyzed by what she revealed, experienced the kind of fear that awakens, rather than destroys. It opened his eyes to realities he had not considered, and it showed him the importance of listening, even when the voice comes from someone society has forgotten. This teaches us that fear is not always the enemy. When faced with courage, fear can become a shield that protects us from irreversible mistakes. The homeless girl's cry of warning was rooted in fear, but that fear was also the reason the millionaire's life changed forever. It was not wealth, not intelligence, not control that saved him in that moment. It was fear channeled through the voice of someone he least expected. When the homeless girl raised her voice, her words did more than just stop the millionaire from driving. They broke through the invisible wall of social barriers that normally separates people like her from people like him. Society often operates with unspoken rules about who is listened to and who is ignored. A millionaire commands attention by default, his words carrying weight simply because of his status, while a homeless girl's voice is often drowned out, overlooked, or dismissed as irrelevant. But in this moment, those social rules shattered. The girl's urgent warning became the only voice that mattered, and the millionaire, frozen in disbelief, was forced to acknowledge that wisdom and truth can come from anyone, regardless of their social standing. This reversal of roles is powerful because it reveals how fragile the structures of status really are. Wealth and power often create an illusion of control, as though money can shield someone from danger or pain. But here, the man's wealth meant nothing. His expensive car, his influence, his comfort, all were powerless in the face of the truth the girl carried. The one who had nothing to her name was suddenly the one with all the power, because her knowledge and her courage were what saved the moment. It highlights how life has a way of leveling the field, reminding us that titles and possessions are temporary, but truth and insight are universal. The girl's courage to speak up also challenges deep social prejudices. Too often, homeless people or those living in poverty are seen as invisible, as though they do not matter. By speaking up in such a bold way, she defied that invisibility. She claimed space where society had denied her one. More importantly, her message carried weight, because it was tied to something deeply personal to the millionaire, his wife. This connection forced him to see her not as a nameless figure on the street, but as someone who knew something about his life, someone whose words could not be ignored. In that instant, she became human to him in a way that he might never have considered before. This breakdown of barriers is not just about two people, it is symbolic of a broader lesson. The story teaches us that voices on the margins must be heard because they often carry perspectives that the privileged cannot see. The millionaire had resources, but he was blind to the danger that lay ahead. The girl had no resources, yet she had vision, awareness, and bravery. The combination of his power and her truth was what prevented disaster. It reminds us that collaboration between different worlds, between wealth and poverty, between privilege and struggle, can create outcomes that neither could achieve alone. Another important element is humility. For someone accustomed to control and authority, the millionaire being stopped by a homeless girl required him to let go of his pride. He had to accept that in that moment, he was not the leader, not the protector, but the one being protected. Humility is not easy, especially for those who are used to others following their commands. Yet true strength often lies in the ability to listen and learn, even when the teacher comes from a place you least expect. The millionaire's shock at her words was more than surprise. It was a crack in the walls of arrogance, allowing humility to enter. This moment also shows how courage can dismantle prejudice. The girl could have stayed silent, afraid of being ignored or even ridiculed. Instead, she chose to speak. Her bravery carried a message that transcended poverty, race, and social status. Her voice taught him that human worth is not defined by wealth, but by action, compassion, and truth. In silencing the gap between their worlds, she taught him a lesson that money could never buy. At its heart, this is a story about breaking chains, the chains of prejudice, of arrogance, of silence. It shows that wisdom is not tied to where you sleep at night or how much money you carry in your pocket. It can belong to anyone, and sometimes it shines brightest through those who have the least. The millionaire, stunned into stillness, learned that day that social barriers crumble when faced with truth spoken with courage. And in that moment, the girl not only saved him, but reminded the world that every voice matters. The millionaire's reaction when he realized the truth behind the girl's words was not just shock. It was a moment of vulnerability that stripped away the layers of pride, arrogance, and distance that wealth had built around him. Up until that point, his identity had been tied to his money, his reputation, and the sense of power that came from being able to control almost every aspect of his life. Yet here was a young homeless girl, someone society would normally consider powerless, and she had stopped him in his tracks with nothing but her voice and her courage. His paralysis at her words was more than disbelief. It was the dawning of humility, a realization that his wealth could not shield him from truth. nor could it prevent someone with nothing from having the strength to change his course. This humility is significant because it represents a shift in perspective. For a man who likely spent years commanding authority and being obeyed without question, being halted by a girl on the streets must have felt like an impossible reversal of roles. Yet this is where the beauty of humility comes in. It forces a person to recognize that they are not invincible, that their social standing does not make them immune to the lessons of life, and that wisdom can emerge from the most unexpected places. The man's paralysis was not weakness, but a sign that his hardened heart was beginning to soften, opening him up to the reality that wealth cannot define true worth. In that moment, he had to confront his own humanity. Money had given him the illusion that he could always be in control, but life has a way of humbling even the most powerful people. The girl's cry was a reminder that there are forces beyond wealth, forces like fate, truth, and courage that can bring even the strongest to their knees. Humility is not about lowering oneself to a lesser state. It is about recognizing that no matter how high you climb, you are still human, fragile, and dependent on others in ways you may not want to admit. The millionaire's stunned silence reflected the first crack in his pride, and that crack was where compassion and understanding could begin to grow. What makes this moment even more powerful is the contrast between the girl and the man. She had nothing, no shelter, no status, no material possessions. But she had the strength to raise her voice in the face of someone much more powerful. He, on the other hand, had everything money could buy, but none of it could help him in that critical moment. The humility he experienced was born from realizing that her voice carried more weight than all his wealth combined. In that instant, the scales of power shifted, and he was forced to acknowledge the dignity and value of a person he might once have overlooked without a second thought. Humility also opens the door to empathy. When a person allows themselves to be humbled, they are no longer standing above others in judgment, but are willing to stand alongside them as equals. The millionaire's stunned reaction could have easily turned into anger or dismissal, but instead, it revealed a willingness to listen. That willingness is what allows transformation to happen. By being humbled, he could see the girl not as a nameless face in poverty, but as a brave human being whose truth had the power to save him. This was not just about preventing him from driving in a dangerous situation. It was about awakening him to the reality that people society ignores often carry the greatest strength. The story demonstrates that humility is often the first step toward real change. Pride isolates people, making them believe they can exist without the help or insight of others, but humility builds bridges. It creates space for connection, understanding, and growth. The millionaire, paralyzed in shock, was experiencing the painful but necessary breaking down of his pride. This experience, though uncomfortable, would shape him into a person capable of empathy and compassion. The girl's voice humbled him, not to humiliate him, but to show him the truth he desperately needed to see. Ultimately, humility is one of the greatest lessons any human being can learn. It reminds us that no matter how much we achieve, we remain students of life, and sometimes our teachers come from the least expected places. The homeless girl became the millionaire's teacher that day, using nothing but her voice and her courage to reveal a truth that wealth could never provide. His humility was not a sign of defeat, but the beginning of transformation. The realization that greatness is not measured by riches, but by the ability to listen, to learn, and to value every voice. The deeper meaning of this story lies in the transformation that comes when lives intersect in unexpected ways. The homeless girl shouting those words and stopping the millionaire was not just an isolated act of bravery. It was the spark that began a chain reaction in both of their lives. For her, it was a moment of courage where she chose to speak up, despite the risks of being ignored or ridiculed, proving that even those society casts aside have voices that matter. For him, it was a wake-up call that wealth and privilege cannot protect against truth, and that sometimes the greatest lessons come from people we least expect. This encounter revealed the beauty of human connection, where two people from completely different worlds found common ground through a moment of vulnerability, honesty, and courage. The transformation started with the girl. Her life, filled with hardship, had made her strong and observant. She saw something dangerous that others might have missed and chose not to stay silent. That decision did not just protect the millionaire from harm, it elevated her from invisibility to being seen, heard, and valued. This moment became proof that her existence mattered, and that even in the depths of poverty, she could influence and change the course of another person's life. That realization can inspire countless others who feel voiceless, reminding them that courage can rewrite their story in ways they never imagined. For the millionaire, the transformation was even more profound. He had lived in a world where people rarely challenged him, where his money ensured respect, obedience, and distance from the struggles of everyday people. Yet, in a single moment, all of that shattered. The girl's voice reached a place inside him that wealth could never touch, the part of him that was human, fragile, and capable of fear. When he froze at her words, it was the beginning of a shift that would reshape his values. He could no longer hide behind the illusion that money made him untouchable. He had to face the fact that wisdom and truth often come from those who possess nothing material, but everything spiritual. The beauty of this transformation lies in what comes after. Once humbled, the millionaire would no longer see people in poverty as invisible shadows. He would carry the memory of the girl who saved him, and that memory would influence how he treated others, how he gave, and how he understood the world. Perhaps it would lead him to extend his wealth, to create opportunities for those like her, or perhaps it would simply change the way he interacted with people on the streets. Either way, he could never return to the ignorance he carried before that moment. His heart had been touched, his pride had been broken, and his humanity had been awakened. On a deeper level, the story highlights the interconnectedness of human lives. We often believe we are walking separate paths, divided by wealth, race, or circumstance, but moments like this prove that life has a way of bringing us together in the most unexpected situations. The girl and the millionaire were not supposed to meet in the ordinary course of life. Yet fate placed them in each other's path for a reason. Her courage and his shock became the bridge that connected two vastly different worlds. This is the essence of transformation. It does not just change individuals, it connects them, reminding us that no matter our status, we are all part of the same human story. What makes this lesson powerful is that transformation often begins with discomfort. The millionaire had to experience shock, paralysis, and even fear before he could grow. Similarly, the girl had to risk rejection by raising her voice. Growth never happens in comfort. It happens when life pushes us into situations that challenge our pride, our beliefs, and our assumptions. The transformation they both experienced is a reflection of how uncomfortable moments can become the most defining chapters of our lives. In the end, the true beauty of this story is not just about a girl saving a man or a man realizing his flaws. It is about the ripple effect of one act of courage. A homeless girl's cry changed the course of a millionaire's life, and in doing so, sent a message to anyone listening. Transformation is possible for everyone. We may think our voices are too small, our status too low, or are struggles too overwhelming to make a difference? But the truth is, one moment of bravery can alter the destiny of another person. That is the essence of hope, humanity, and transformation. The understanding that no one is ever too powerless to inspire change, and no one is ever too powerful to be changed.